So, this is my first time making a review video like this, but because I love Baldur's Gate 3 so much, I've been inspired to throw my hat in the review video ring to see where I land. And since my wife didn't take my PS5 in the divorce, I'll be making review videos of every game that I stream myself playing after I finish playing them. Forewarning, I am an adult, so I say adult things, and I make adult jokes, swear words that unfortunately will be censored so I don't piss off my YouTube overlords. Now, I'd like to think I engage in said jokes and swear words tastefully, because I've no interest in being deliberately offensive or juvenile. But all the same, my goal is to cultivate a mature audience, and my videos ain't listed as not suitable for kids for no reason. Although if there was not suitable for aggressively annoying option, I'd choose that too, but alas. So if any kids find this video, please do not watch it without your parents' supervision or approval, because it's not just my language that's cause for concern. This game is rated mature and contains pretty graphic sex scenes, violence, and adult language, all of which I plan to cover in part 2 of this video. You've been warned. Now then, if you're new to my channel, know that it's a genuine pleasure to have you here. And if you like my work, then please do like and subscribe. I hope to see you all in the comments, on my live streams, and future reviews. And heads up, there will be an advertisement for my sponsor at the end of the video. Check the link in the description for the link to her website, and be sure to use the promo code she was so kind as to give me for a discount on your purchases. But only after you've seen the ad and know what you're getting yourself into. With all that being said, let's get this party started. So, let me preface everything I'm about to say with some background about me. I'm 29 years old, going on 30, and I've been playing video games my whole life. Role-playing games, also known as RPGs, are my favorite, and I've played a wide variety of them. Growing up, I was big into pretty much every type of MMORPG, especially Nexon's MapleStory and Mabinogi. Both games I highly recommend. I've also played the now old but aged like fine wine, turn-based JRPG series of Final Fantasy and almost all of its subsequent entries, as well as many character decision-driven RPGs like Fable. And of course, I've played every one of From Software's action-adventure RPG series I like to call the 100 Ways to Get Your Shit Rocked simulator, better known as the Dark Souls series. So believe me, the list goes on and on. As for D&D and other tabletop games, unless you count experiencing capitalism on steroids through Monopoly, I only have marginal experience, having played Magic the Gathering, D&D, and Pathfinder online with friends. And just an aside, D&D is far superior to Pathfinder in every way, at least in my opinion. With all that being said, I can confidently say that Baldur's Gate 3 is not only the best turn-based, character-driven RPG experience I've ever had, but also that it's arguably the best way to get into D&D for anyone unfamiliar with it. In this video, I will cover just enough to give you a good idea of how everything works, based off my personal experience through 6 playthroughs, but not so much that it completely spoils the game for you. And everything will be done in sections, so you can click on said sections through the timestamps in the description below. And lastly, I will not spoil any especially important story beats or lore. That is going to be for part 2's review, where I go over characters, classes, equipment, things like in an overall story. But if you want to go into the game completely blind, then don't watch this video either. However, I will save you the trouble of waiting until the end of this video and the end of part 2 of the other review for my personal rating of the game by telling you now that this game is a solid 8 out of 10 for me, with the negative 2 points being due to some troublesome bugs I encountered and some design choices that I personally took issue with. So let's start off with something simple. The user interface. It's easy on the eyes, easy to follow, The text contrasts well with the background and is easily readable. Take notes, Capcom, because the text in Monster Hunter World is damn near indecipherable due to how poorly it contrasts with the backgrounds. With that said, the action radios contrast well with the environment and other textures. Additionally, you can edit the radio however you see fit, which I highly recommend doing because otherwise your skills will be all over the place. So, the game has 4 official difficulties: Explorer, Easy Mode, Balanced, Normal Mode, Tactician, Hard Mode, and Honor, Eat Shit and Die Mode. As well as Custom Difficulty Editor, but that's, just a mix of all of it. Explorer is as it's described when you select it. A smooth ride if you're just in it for the story. You get a nice boost in HP and the damage rolls heavily favor you. So by all means, get a taste of everything on this mode. Balanced mode is sufficiently challenging on its own, and the mode I recommend you start with. The reason being because it feels fair and not overly reliant on luck. You can still play about as creatively and recklessly as you did on Explorer mode, but you'll obviously need to be a bit more careful because your HP is now what it normally should be, so you can't just tank every attack like you could do in Explorer mode. Tactician mode can be incredibly difficult, but it's manageable if you know what you're doing. The enemies have higher HP and defense, and the dice rolls favor them. I struggled with it my first time around, but after actually using my big thinky brain, I eventually adapted to it quite well, leaving the only fights that felt genuinely difficult and arguably unbalanced being the optional Answer and Raphael fights. These fights are the only ones where it felt like the game itself was telling me, your strategies mean nothing here, clench your cheeks and pray. For Raphael, a few less enemies would have been better at the very least. And for Answer, your hits are significantly weaker against him, much less likely to succeed, and he has an absurd amount of range, and he hits like a fucking truck. So maybe dialing back the damage he does would work to balance the fight better, so it doesn't feel like you're throwing pebbles while he's launching nukes. And then there's Honor mode, which is all of that on steroids. I want you to imagine you're playing D&D, but the Dungeon Master hates you. Maybe you ruined his favorite outfit, or maybe you stole his money, or maybe you were so high on acid that in a fit of violent rage, you kicked a hole in his wall and nearly bit off his finger when he tried to stop you. I know that was very specific, don't ask why. Whatever the case may be, the DM hates you and is hell-bent on making you feel like you're playing that One Glass Bridge challenge from Squid Game. Timely reference, I know. But you love it. You wouldn't be subjecting yourself to that torment if you didn't, and you can only die once. If you die, you can either end the campaign with Honor, as the game states, or continue in Custom mode with Dishonor. I don't know how much else about Honor mode because I gave up. It was just ridiculous. So I'll leave it at that. While we're on the topic of difficulties, let's move on to enemies in combat. Honestly, there's not too much to say that won't be blatantly obvious to you with each encounter. There's only about 6 or so enemies that have less obvious but highly specific conditions you have to meet in order to beat them. Mind you, every other fight can be just as intense and memorable as the condition-specific fights, but that depends on you. You see, the best part about this game is that there's no one correct way to fight. Just about anything you can think of can work if you play your cards right, and that's what I highly recommend you all do. Think outside the box, experiment, get creative, make mistakes, and try new things. That's how you make the straightforward fights just as, or even more memorable than the condition-specific fights. Or you can just place smoke power barrels everywhere and... Now, I won't spoil who those 6 or so enemies are with the specific conditions I spoke of before, nor what you have to do to beat them, but I will say this much. Get into the habit of clicking on enemies and examining them. Read their conditions, resistances, and stats, and then figure it out from there. Sometimes you'll have to eat a couple blows to figure it out, but it'll be worth it once you connect the dots. Another thing worth noting is that if you use a spell that requires concentration, the enemies will zero in on that character as if they kicked a hornet's nest. So if you're planning to use spells like that, then I highly advise you either get the Warcaster feat, at the first given opportunity, or make sure you get that character either behind cover or safe distance away after casting said spells. And I know what you're thinking, you know, put a tank in front of them, somebody that the enemies can focus on instead of your spellcaster. I've tried that. It doesn't work. They will go after this. They will ignore the tank and go after the spellcaster every time. Lastly, either use the environment to your advantage or alter the environment to your advantage. Alter the environment to your advantage. Because if you don't, the enemies sure as hell will. I'm not elaborating on that. It'll be more fun for you if you figure it out, if you figure this out on your own. But I will give you a hint. A lot of what I learned I discovered from paying attention to what the enemies did to me. They will use every resource, status effect, and or environmental condition against you. So, learn from them and do the same. With regards to each difficulty, long rests require a different amount of camp supplies, depending on the difficulty you select. Explorer and Balanced require 40 camp supplies, whereas Tactician and Honor require 80. Don't worry too much about this though, because if you look around enough, you will find an abundance of camp supplies that will allow you to use long rests often. However, if you're going to play on Tactician mode or higher, I highly recommend you be a bit more conservative with your long rests, otherwise you may run out of camp supplies. To avoid this, I suggest swapping out your companions after their skills and spell slots are used up. Read the recharge conditions for your character's skills. They'll be recharged by either short rest or long rest. And just a heads up, vendors restock on money and items like camp supplies after you long rest. So if you've got the gold, you'll never run out of camp supplies. And while we're on the topic of spells, there's an abundance of skills and spells to choose from, so you'll never be left wanting for more. But I think this is where the game runs into the problem with introducing a little too much, because there were quite a few spells that, at least for me, had absolutely no utility in any scenario even after 6 playthroughs of mixing it up. Like Dark Vision, for example. If someone can tell me where the hell I'm supposed to use that spell, I'm all ears. If it's supposed to be used as a low-level counter to the darkness spell, cool. But why would I even bother doing that when by the time you even get to the point where enemies start casting darkness, I could instead cast the infinitely superior daylight spell, which dispels all darkness in the surrounding area. And then there's the Feigned Death spell, which sounds good in theory, but in practice you might as well actually be dead. I thought it was supposed to work similarly to the Sanctuary spell, but no, it's Sanctuary with absolutely none of its benefits, and it doesn't even fully protect you the way Sanctuary does. So what even is the point of it? I could go on all day about each and every skill and spell, but that ain't what y'all are here for. But if you want me to make a video on the skills and spells of Baldur's Gate, then I'll happily do so. Just let me know in the comments. Now with all that being said, there's one last thing worth noting on the topic of spells. You would think that the higher level the spell, the higher chance of success of it landing would be. But no, the percent chance of success remains the same no matter how powerful it is. Same with how long the spell effects last. The only time the spell's level is relevant is when you want to increase its damage or lessen the likelihood of it being countered by counterspell. This is one of those design choices I take issue with. Hell, I'd even be fine with spells being less likely to hit with each increase in level. It would at least be a gamble that makes sense, you know? High risk, high reward. But alas. So be mindful of how you use your spells. No sense in wasting high level spell slots for the exact same effects you get at level 1. As I've said before, the D&D aspects of Baldur's Gate are streamlined in such a way that you don't have to think too hard about them. You don't have to calculate or know what a 1d6 damage roll is. The game straight up tells you the minimum and maximum damage you can do from that roll. You don't need to roll for every single skill, spell, or ability check like you would in traditional D&D. The game does it all for you. But be mindful as to what abilities you choose to put points into, because those points can be the deciding factor of whether or not you find neat little treasures hiding in plain sight, or prevent an enemy from pushing you off a cliff, which is something that happened to me. The latter of which they will try to do surprisingly often. As for the former, like finding hidden dirt mounds, the game doesn't show you what skill checks you have to roll against to discover the dirt mound. You can just be exploring aimlessly, smelling the roses, listening to an NPC pitch her hire desperate refugees for low pay idea to her sister, and then bam, perception check. However, if everyone fails, then you'll have to go back to camp and switch your party members with characters who haven't yet failed the do my eyes work check to get another chance at discovering whatever hidden object, item, or trap lay before you. If everyone still fails, well, then sucks to suck, buddy, because that check is lost to you forever unless you reload a save from before the check. I wasn't stressed out about that, though. Having played the game as much as I have, I can assure you that whatever it is you missed is negligible. Like, it'd be cool to have passed the check and obtained whatever it is that was hidden, but it's not the end of the world. The items are always going to be items that, although useful, you can live without. Can't say the same about traps, though. If you fail the necessary checks to discover and or disable them, you're getting hit. And at best, the trap's damage is little more than a tickle, but at worst, the trap's damage will slap the taste out of your mouth. So it's best to bring someone with high perception and sleight of hand when traversing through trap-laden dungeons and buildings. As for the puzzles in the game, there's only one puzzle that allows for a shortcut, at least to my knowledge, which is one of my few criticisms of the game. There weren't nearly as many puzzles as I thought there would be for a D&D based game this large. And again, to my knowledge, there's only about 4 puzzles. And with high enough sleight of hand and dexterity, you can get through just about everything else with ease, especially with ability check buffs like guidance. Speaking of sleight of hand and dexterity, you can steal from literally any NPC in the game if you use the hide skill and then select pickpocket once you're behind them. I know some of you kleptomaniacs out there are itching to get yourselves a 5-figure discount every time you see something shiny, but it's surprisingly hard to do without having to save scum, and that's even with high dexterity and proficiency in sleight of hand, so I honestly wouldn't recommend it, unless you really want that shiny thing. After all, gold is sparse throughout the game, so don't expect to be able to buy everything you want. I struggled with getting gold in my first playthrough before I had the brilliant idea of selling quite literally every piece of equipment I found that I wasn't going to use. So I would often just kill or knock out any NPC that had something I wanted and looted their bodies. Heads up though, when you do that, the items in the NPC's inventory shrink significantly. In other words, they don't have all the stuff they were initially selling before you decided to beat their asses for the crime of having something you wanted. So you're better off just scrounging up the cash to buy the things you want. Otherwise, it may well be lost to you forever. But in doing all of this, 2 things struck me. 1, how easily you could get out of trouble should you be caught in the act. This isn't a deal breaker, mind you, but I think the stakes should be a wee bit higher for killing or knocking out NPCs. Like, you shouldn't just be able to talk your way out of damn near everything, although there are a few cases where you can't talk your way out of trouble, like if you get caught having used the spell Friends or Charm Person on an NPC to pass a persuasion check. Turns out people don't like mind control magic being used on their friends. Go figure. And 2, how few quests reward you with gold? I wouldn't have felt so inclined to shake down NPCs nor scavenge and sell every piece of equipment I found like I'm on an episode of Pawn Stars had I been rewarded with or found more opportunities to get gold in a more dignified fashion. This sort of gets rectified in Act 3, but that's only if you do certain quests that are entirely optional and only available to you under specific circumstances. There we go. Item usage is also fairly straightforward, requiring either an action or a bonus action to use depending on the item, and you can use your items directly from your character sheet page rather than just your radial menu. And one thing I discovered through some fun trial and error was that you can move items from your companion's inventories into your own during combat without using an action or a bonus action, and then use said item during that turn. Or you can just use the item directly from your companion's inventory. Mind you, all of this has to be done on the character sheet page, and the only thing you can't do is use the place item in world option while that item is still in your companion's inventory. It'll appear like it's bugged, but what's really happening is that your companion is trying to place the item in the world. I learned that the hard way when I tried it and ended up with Shadowheart alerting a group of monsters I was trying to ambush. And there are a lot of items in this game, all of which offer a wide variety of uses that can save you in a pinch if used correctly. Although, if I'm being honest, you can go the entire game without using any items, save for health potions, just fine. Seldom did I ever feel like I had to use an item to get by, even on Tactician mode. So, whether or not you actually get any use out of your items depends on how you play. I personally like using my items just to spice things up from time to time. And I highly recommend that at least using the potion of animal speaking and potion of detect thoughts at every given opportunity for some fun or at least interesting dialogue. Now, my favorite and most abused item is the Forgotten Realms equivalent of meth, the very appropriately named Speed Potion. This delightful bottle of liquid adrenaline legitimately feels broken at times with how massively it turns the tides in your favor. They're easy to make, absurdly cheap to buy, given how powerful they are, and they don't require concentration to use, unlike their counterpart, the Hasten skill, with the only drawback being that you become lethargic and lose a turn when it expires. Which leads me to the Alchemy tab. You can craft loads of different potions if you got the ingredients, not as many nor as often as I'd like. You're honestly more likely to end up with an abundance of potions just from scavenging and buying them than you will through alchemy. So it honestly feels like a tacked on feature, not necessarily a necessary accessory to your playthroughs. Then there's the Mind Flare or Illithid Power tab, which you unlock by using Mind Flare parasites you either find scattered about or get from the corpses of infected hosts. This tab is pretty self-explanatory. And look, I don't care how much the Dream Guardian keeps negging me and telling me how much more powerful and sexy I'd become if only I'd embrace my potential, like some creepy guy telling a woman she would make a lot of money on OnlyFans. I avoided using them because I felt like consuming the magical brain worms of dead people seemed like the kind of thing that would come back to haunt me. But it turns out you can use almost the entire tab without it changing anything about you, the story, or how you interact with people. Except for Gale, who will marvel over how it's affecting you with the same morbid curiosity of a doctor looking at your x-rays, wondering why there's a model train up your ass. But nope, nothing changes definitively until you consume the Astral Touch tadpole you get midway through the game. So by all means, give the Illithid powers a try. The mileage you'll get out of those skills may vary, but the best one by far is Luck of the Far Realms, which allows you to decide whether or not your attack will be a critical hit once per long rest. And I highly advise against doing Omelium's quest if you're truly trying to resist becoming a Mind Flare in any capacity. Drinking the potion he gives you makes it incredibly hard to resist consuming the Astral Touch tadpole when the prompt comes up later in the game. Then there's the Traversal. It's a light jog, and that's about it. You can't run, however, you can be made to walk if you're encumbered due to having too much stuff in your inventory. And yes, inventory weight is a thing in this game, and yes, I hate it too. I'm personally not a fan of inventory weight in games, but it's not a deal breaker because you can easily send anything you have and anything you pick up either to camp or to your other party members. Additionally, how much weight you can carry depends on how much strength your character has, so inventory weight is only really an issue when you're using classes that don't use a lot of strength. But don't worry about having to travel far anyways. If you look around, there's plenty of waypoints that'll allow you to fast travel. And you can also jump. I say this because I genuinely didn't know that was an option outside of combat in my first playthrough, so I was stuck at the broken bridge in the Blight Village, wondering what to do like a dumbass until my friend told me to jump across said bridge. And one thing to note is that if the jump you're doing takes fall damage, and it'll tell you, then your companions won't jump with you. You'll have to manually make them jump and take the damage. Also, if there's anyone or anything blocking you from moving forward, which happens way more often than you think, you can just jump over them. Oh, and just additionally, with regards to jumping, I don't know if this is a bug or not, but so when you jump across paths and whatnot, sometimes your party members will just not follow you. They'll just stay there. There were quite a few instances where I would do a jump and then continue forward, thinking the rest of my party followed, only to later realize, like when I would start combat, that the party member that didn't jump is just chilling way the background. So be mindful to make sure that everyone has jumped across and is still following you. Then there's the dip weapon mechanic. I couldn't find many opportunities to use it pretty much throughout the entirety of all 6 of my playthroughs. And I can't really think of a reason to use it, even given circumstances to use it, because you receive, especially the further in the game you go, an abundance of weapon coating items that aren't circumstantial to use, like the dip mechanic is. So, honestly, much like the alchemy tab, it just feels like another feature that's just tacked on. Same with the improvised weapon mechanic, only being useful under very specific circumstances and only if you feel like going out of your way to actually use it. But why use that when you could just as easily stick to the weapon you've got? I suppose you could use an improvised weapon in the off chance your weapon gets knocked out of your hand, and you choose not to waste an action to re-equip said weapon, but much like myself, the thought of even doing that will likely go right over your head in the heat of combat. I tried using a dip weapon mechanic, and it's just really not good. It's just kind of there. If it were up to me, I'd have given more enemies a disarming strike skill so as to at least encourage the idea of using the improvised weapon skill, because as it stands, enemies don't start being able to disarm you until so late in the game that you have long since forgotten that the improvised weapon skill even exists. So, this is another one of those cases where it's like, this is what I'd like to call a great mechanic in concept, like in theory, but very poorly executed in practice. Whereas the throw, dash, push, help, and disengage mechanics work exactly as intended, and you get ample opportunities to use them. There's really not much to say about them past that, except for with regards to push, that came in handy a surprising amount more than I thought it would. Where in the many instances where I had to push my allies to safety or push the enemies off a cliff. And then there's stealth. Stealth is surprisingly competent in this game, and whether or not you pass a stealth check upon being seen is done automatically like every other ability check. If you're highly proficient in stealth, or have stealth checks, your stealth check buffed enough, you can literally be hidden in plain sight even if you're seen by multiple enemies at the same time, which you'll pretty much have to do often if you're trying to use the only skill Asterian's good for outside of having perfectly luscious hair and encouraging you to be your worst self, his sneak attack. Lastly, your environment plays into your stealth success. If you're in a well-lit area or under a torch, you'll be more easily seen. Conversely, in a dark area, you're more likely to succeed your stealth checks. Shocking, I know. Now, dialogue options vary depending on your race, class, and knowledge you've obtained through the things you found and the decisions you've made. I won't say much about this because I sincerely think you're all better off seeing for yourselves how well developed the dialogue is in this game, and the various outcomes you'll get from whichever dialogue option you choose. Again, I highly recommend you using the Potion of Animal Speaking and Potion of Detect Thoughts for some fun dialogue. Hell, I'll give you all an example of something especially juicy. Find the letter Kethric's wife left him and see what happens when you confront him about it. It certainly shocked me when I discovered it on my 4th playthrough. And I highly recommend you talk to every named NPC. There are a lot of either side quests or fun interactions you can have with people. I missed out on a lot by not doing so my first playthrough, but subsequent playthroughs I decided to be more thorough and had a damn good time because of it. The game truly rewards exploration and interacting with people, or punishes you, depending on how you play. And lastly, the bugs. Okay, I want to preface everything I'm about to say with the fact that I wrote this script well before patch 6, which has apparently resulted in so many bugs that the game is damn near unplayable. So be mindful of that. I played this game well before patch 6, and again, 6 playthroughs through. So the bugs I encountered are going to be vastly different from the ones you all have encountered up to this point and post patch 6. So here goes. And and last thing, kudos to Larian, because despite the bugs you encounter, they have been working overtime to patch any and all bugs that are reported. Like, they're very responsive to dealing with bugs and people's complaints. So, Larian Studios, if you guys see this, kudos to you guys for being very active on these problems. So, what I wrote about this was that there are a couple bugs I encountered that I hope they would one day fix, many of which they have, and especially one big one I'll bring up soon. None of these bugs, at least for me at the time, were like deal breakers or game breaker or anything like that, and none of which couldn't be resolved by me reloading my previous save file. Except for during my first playthrough, after saving Halsin from Orin, he was bugged for the rest of the game. I couldn't talk to him, remove him as a companion, couldn't heal him, nothing. So after he finally died, I was basically carrying around a corpse no matter where I went. Which was funny at first, but got old real fast. And I did not have that problem in subsequent playthroughs though, so again, this is what I'm talking about, where this seemed like a unique bug. Then there was the one I got after doing the sex minigame thing with the Drow twins and Shadowheart. No matter what I did, I couldn't re-equip our armor. So, but all I had to do was reload my last save, problem solved. Just don't do anything with the Drow twins. But by far the biggest bug that everyone was dealing with for way too long, but they've recently fixed in patch 6, was the shield bash counter mechanic. It just didn't work at all. For anyone, not even the enemies. So, I'd hope they'd fix it eventually, but they did. Unfortunately, fixing that big problem seems to have caused a million others, so we'll see how that goes. Whew. So that's everything for this review. Part 2 is going to cover the classes, characters, equipment, and story. So if you like this review, you're going to love what I have to say about the topics in Part 2, especially the characters section, because boy howdy do I have some fun things to say about all the characters. I absolutely adore each and every one of them, and I think, at least I'd like to think, that you guys are really, really going to love what I have to say about them. Or hate it. Depends on who's your favorite character or not. So with that said, it's sponsor advertisement time. Cynthia of Cynthia's Creative Craft has been the unofficial sponsor of my channel and loyal supporter of my endeavors since like day one. Either through financial support or watching my videos to help me get the watch hours I needed to become monetizable, and sometimes even being the sole viewer of my live streams. But more importantly than that, she's been an incredible friend since the day we met back in Quantico, Virginia, when she was my career planner while I was on active duty. Yeah, fun fact, I'm a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, something I could talk about plenty, but I'll save that story for another time. My point is that Cynthia is someone dear to me, so just as she supported me, I'm going to do the same for her here. Cynthia skillfully makes everything she sells by hand, from carefully crafting all sorts of delightful little trinkets to lovingly crocheting all manner of adorable and useful items. And yes, she takes specific requests, but within reason. So sorry folks, there will be no risque or raunchy items made. And for those of you looking to adorn yourselves in holiday trinkets or spread some holiday cheer, Cynthia's got you covered with her selection of holiday-themed items. Hell, St. Patrick's Day will be here before you know it, so buy now before it's too late. I personally am especially fond of her bracelets, one of which I'm wearing right now. Believe me, I never take it off because it looks good on me, it's so comfortable that I hardly notice it's there, and it's so durable that it withstands being attacked by my cats. And best of all, our prices are reasonably cheap. But if even these low prices are just a little too much for you right now, then use the discount in the description below to get 30% off all purchases. In any event you miss today's discount, worry not, because she offers new discounts every upcoming holiday. So stick around, because I'll be sure to advertise her business around those times. And if you'd like to support Cynthia through more than just purchasing her wares, then you can find her social media account links in the description below. Whew, alright, advertisement over. But since we're on the topic, there's something I want you all to know about me and sponsorships in my videos going forward. I will never advertise for anyone that I don't fully trust or believe in, nor will I advertise for anything that I don't either use myself or believe that you all in my audience would benefit from using. So there'll be no dog mobile games, no useless fucking self-help sites, no grossly overpriced meal prep businesses, and no mediocre headphones. I don't care how big my channel gets, nor how much money anyone offers me, it'll be a cold day in hell before I endorse a bunch of bull that you're all better off without. And I'm not just drawing these lines for the sake of those in my audience, I'm doing this for me too. I will never let any of this become my job or sole source of income. Not just because that would suck the fun out of this for me, but mainly because I've seen what this does to people. If you've been on the internet long enough and paid enough attention to other content creators, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. That said, if you all want to support me financially, you can send me super chats during my live streams, read my articles on Medium, subscribe to my channel memberships here on YouTube, or subscribe to my Patreon. Your financial support would be greatly appreciated, if for no other reason that it makes it easier for me to pay the musician who composes the songs for my video, the video maker editors who help me make future videos, and for me to pay anyone else whose services I'd like to enlist for future videos. And if you'd like to come find me on more than just YouTube, then you can reach me on multiple sites linked in the description below. So with all that said, thank you all for coming. I hope to see you all in part 2 of this review. Until then, take care.